Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here in the Treehouse. Before we start our discussion of this week's entry into the Positive Masculinity playlist, I wanted to tell you to check out the show notes for the list of sources we use in this episode, as well as a list of content warnings. If you'd like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, find us on Instagram and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and enjoy the show.
Well, for me,
let Goofy take the wheel.
Thinking about this movie about Goofy and his son, I always come back to one idea that has really carried me throughout the years, which is don't think about Goofy having sex. Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am your host, Kelcee Sykes. With me, as always, is my guy in the sky, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington, PhD. How are you today, Spencer?
I don't know. I was trying to figure out why I was your guy in the sky today.
Because I couldn't think of a better... I tried so hard. I've been trying all week to think of a good joke. And all I could think of is like, oh, I guess I could call you my goof. That's not a good joke. That's not a good joke.
My one true cast member? Huh?
My perfect podcaster.
Yes, my perfect podcast partner, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington.
Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys. We're here. What are we talking about, Spencer?
Podcasts and fishing and Goofy. It's the Disney Day. And I'm going to say up top, all you folks that really, really, really like Disney and you're my age or around about then, check yourself, all right? Just relax.
We are not going to wade into the what counts as part of the Disney Renaissance drama. I don't care. I don't care that you only like The Lion King.
Your fandom scares me a little bit. And
your parks, the lines are too long.
We'd rather just not get into it.
Yeah.
Frankly.
We used to live close to Orlando. It was bad.
Scarred.
Never been to Anaheim. Maybe that one's fine.
It's not. So what we're here to say is we're talking about the movie. We're talking about the Goofy. And yeah, that's our line. Talk about Goof, though. Like Goof.
Yeah, we can talk about Goof. Well, boy, are we gonna talk about Goofy. We have returned to the well of movies that I liked as a kid that you had never heard of, never seen, no idea, didn't know they existed. I don't know how you missed this one, though. I'm gonna be honest with you. This one was a cornerstone.
Well, this one didn't come to theaters, did it?
I think it did, but it kind of hit its stride in, like, the Disney Channel era, I believe.
See, that's the thing, is you and I both, early childhood, neither one of us had cable, and then we got it at different times. So, like, I remember getting access to the Disney Channel and cable and stuff like that when I was, like, third, fourth grade or something, going into middle school. And, yeah, I think I've told the story already, but, like, I remember at that time, the sequel, the extremely Goofy movie, would come on the Disney Channel like all the freaking time. But because I'd never seen the original, I didn't know that was the sequel. I thought that was, when you kept saying the Goofy movie, I thought that was it. That was the Goofy movie.
You thought the adverb usage in the title was just a called shot, that they were like, this is an extremely Goofy movie. We're not messing around. We've made one movie about Goofy. We thought it was just going to be Goofy. It turned out to be extremely Goofy.
No. Yes.
That's the story, folks.
Yes, but no. But I mean, that was also the early 2000s where people were really still leaning into the late 90s extreme. So, like, the X Games were still, like, kind of a big thing. Like, Doritos were blasting everybody with flavor.
Oh, like, they're still doing that.
So many blasts of product placement. But so I just kind of assumed that because they were skateboarding in the trailers, like, that was why it was so extreme.
That's why it was extreme.
But yeah, little did I know. But yeah, like you said, I'd never seen this one. This was new to me, so I appreciate you once again for hooking up Chaboy.
So a Goofy movie, as the title suggests, follows everyone's favorite Disney character. I believe the artist currently known as George Geef. he's had a
Georgia
couple...
O'Geef.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Someone has to have made that joke before.
And me just now.
Yeah, no one calls him that. That's just
No.
supposedly what his name is. The movie does call him Goofy. So it follows Goofy and his teenage son, Max. And that's the whole family. And we learn nothing whatsoever about any other people that could possibly be in that family.
Yeah.
And it, like all good movies, this one starts with a dream sequence. So we learn this is Max. He is having a dream. And we learn two things about Max in this opening dream sequence. One, he has a crush on his classmate Roxanne, who is what appears to be just a human girl with a dog nose. And
Nice.
two, Max is very afraid of becoming like his father, Goofy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I got a question for you first, and this one is important.
Okay.
So I feel like if we took a poll of millennials and asked them which characters were sort of responsible, which cartoon characters were responsible for their sexual awakenings,
Whoa.
I feel like Roxanne would
Goofy?
be...
Oh.
No, Roxanne! I feel like Roxanne would be on that list. Who's up there for you?
Okay, so slightly before, I would see, like, the example that comes to mind for me is Babs from Space Jam. Not for me personally, but, like, when they, like, so overtly made a Bugs Bunny that was a girl.
That was their intention. They knew what they were doing with that
weird.
design.
Well, so for me then, I think The Little Mermaid was probably always the, like, sexiest one that I rewatched the most as a little kid. It's like, it's a girl in a swimsuit.
I know what my answer is, and it's also the answer that every millennial of a certain type would give, and it is She-Go from Kim Possible.
That's another good one.
So we can just... That and...
Jasmine from Aladdin was another big one.
That's a good... I was always worried because she is so disproportionate. And I was like, that woman is going to snap right in half. Just topple out. Her head is so big and her waist is so small. And I could not get over it.
Me neither, I guess.
Yeah. That's my type. I love a bobble-headed woman with no organs.
I do. Well, and so it's worth bringing up because, like, even in that first dream sequence, she is, like... too hot to trot. It's very much supposed to be like a romantic, borderline wet dream, and then it turns horrific when he starts like morphing into a youngster.
It's
like,
so scary.
But it's also such a resonant fear, like
yeah,
you know, becoming like your parents or whatever.
Well,
like...
especially when your father is Goofy.
Goofiest man alive.
Goofy.
The dadliest of dads.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Oh my god. Yeah, so Goofy was going through a bit of a transformation in the 90s, as so many fathers were. We'll talk more about that later. Depicted in this movie, though, he is like a caring father.
For
like,
sure.
he is checking a lot of the good dad boxes, right? Like, he keeps a clean house, he gets his son up for school on time, his son seems to have enough food to eat, enough clothing to wear. It all seems good. But Goofy's problem is that he's not a particularly engaged father. So right after this borderline wet dream, he wakes Max up like wearing a towel and vacuuming at like 7 a.m. And not only does he like damage this cardboard cutout that Max has in his room of a musical artist named Powerline.
His favorite.
His favorite. He sucks it into the vacuum and like damages this cardboard cutout thing. Not only does he do that, he doesn't know who Powerline is, despite the fact that every surface in Max's room has a poster of Powerline on it. So it is kind of like, hey, Goofy, who bought all those? You must have seen some of these posters at some point. Did it never occur to you to ask your son who this man he has all over his room is?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Come on, man.
Well, the message is very clear. It's like the second scene in the movie. We see him literally performing 2 or 3 tasks, getting ready to go to his full-time job.
Yeah, he's also doing the mambo while all this is happening.
I mean, he is doing the mambo. Like, well, I'm just saying, like, it's the image is very clear. He's overworked and spread too thin, and so, like so many 90s dads, you know, he's like, it's not a lot of time to know who this strange spandexy man is in your son's room. Well, maybe there should be a little bit more time to know.
Ask one question, Goofy. By the time that he has a life-size effigy of a person in
Yeah.
his bedroom. Maybe ask a question, Goofy. One question. It's fine. But because Goofy is spread so thin and is so out of touch, he doesn't notice that Max has been putting together this special plan for his last day of school. So Max and his friends in the AV club stage a takeover of this like last day of school assembly, where Max dresses up like Powerline. He's got the sort of iconic yellow jumpsuit on, and he's done his hair up and everything. And his plan is to like lip sync to one of Powerline's songs while his friends film him and then like project him up on a screen that's on the stage. But the things kind of fall apart immediately, and he ends up like knocking over the screen and getting caught on this like zip line thing. And so, I mean, to his credit, he rolls with it. So he's still lip syncing along to this song, but now he's like swinging out above the audience.
Students love it. The students are going nuts. They think this is like the greatest thing ever.
Everyone thinks this is very cool. Roxanne sees him. She's impressed.
Right.
Max is kind of like not very popular. There's a whole song at the beginning of the movie where everyone else is like, not this fucking guy. Get him out of here. Never want to see this kid again.
Again, context clues. Like, all his buddies are in the AV club, like, which isn't even a thing anymore. It's just like the classic sort of group for nerds to join, basically.
They're very good at what they do, though. This is a complicated operation that it's 3 kids managed to set this whole thing up. It's pretty good.
Impromptu concert. It's great.
Yeah, it is very cool. The principal does not appreciate it, though.
This is less cool. Cool.
He is not well, and he's voiced by Wallace Shawn, so when he disapproves of you, you really feel it.
Yeah, you know.
And so he and his friends get called down to the principal's office, and here we see a range of reactions from the kids. So the first is Bobby, who, if you have ever seen a Goofy movie before, you probably don't know the name Bobby, but he's the one who has the cheese whiz.
You know the cheese.
Yeah, he does not seem to be worried. He greets the principal like by name and is sort of like, you again, my old friend. So they've built up a bit of a rapport. Max is sitting by himself out in the little like waiting room office area, and he is very nervous. He's got his head down. He's not happy that his dad is going to find out that he's done this.
Yeah, big point there. He doesn't really care about what the principal is going to do to him. It's very much
doesn't
focused
want his
about
dad to find out.
Yeah.
And then PJ, who is the son of Kingdom Hearts villain Pete, walks out of the principal's office with this like glazed over look in his eyes. He has gone through all of the stages of grief. He is like, my dad is going to kill me.
Yeah.
Like, like murder me. Like, not he's going to ground me. He's going to kill me. Pete is going to kill PJ. So there's sort of a range of reactions. We'll talk a little bit more about PJ later. He's having a rough time. But the good news for Max is that Roxanne was very impressed by his performance. So she and Stacy show up. Stacy is the student body president and like all around shit starter. And Roxanne's friend.
She's having a party at her house.
And she's like, you gotta go talk to him. So she does the thing where she like shoves Roxanne into Max, and it's a whole thing. And they get talking, and Roxanne is like, you could have totally come to Stacy's party with me. And what they're doing, and this is the best, they're going to have a party at Stacy's house to watch a Powerline concert on pay-per-view. Now, was there any better indication in the 1990s that someone's father was like money laundering mob boss rich than the availability of pay-per-view in their home?
To this day, when you say the phrase pay-per-view, even though now in the modern era, due to, you know, packaging of various streaming services,
we're all doing pay-per-view now.
I've pay-per-viewed a thing, but then the phrase pay-per-view, to me, the first image that comes to mind is like a $1,300 home entertainment center with like a big ass, like heavy TV and surround sound speakers, because like someone has a home theater if they're paying for pay-per-view. Like,
yeah. I kind of didn't like think pay-per-view was a real thing when I was younger. Like, I was even older than you by the time my family even got cable. I was a teenager before we had more than 5 channels in my house. The idea of pay-per-view it just like filled me with fear. It was this thing that I was always afraid I was accidentally going to do in a hotel room or something. Like I was going to click on the wrong thing and my parents were going to get charged $6 for something and I would be like, oh my God. And I would be PJ staring off into the middle distance like they're going to kill me.
They're just going to murder me.
They're going to kill me. That I accidentally... And it's always just like boxing. That's the only thing I can even think of that was ever on pay-per-view. And I was like, why would somebody pay to watch boxing? There was always a disconnect for me.
The big one when I was a kid, the reason I knew people who weren't super rich that watched pay-per-view, it was a group of like working class folks that would get together and have something similar to this. It was a pay-per-view party and it was always for WrestleMania. But that's an event, you know?
There were like bars or restaurants that their whole thing to get people in is that they would have some kind of pay-per-view event that they were showing.
Yeah.
It would be like, everybody has to go down to the local Applebee's. They're going to be doing a pay-per-view.
This is, no. Yeah, we had, so like before our town had a Buffalo Wild Wings, the scene was like, you got together in someone's basement and like, you chipped in
everybody
for pay-per-view.
Pulled together.
Yeah, it's like $60 to watch a stupid boxing match or whatever. And like, you know, you bring beer and money for pay-per-view and pizza.
God, those were... I mean, I don't know if that's better or worse than
it
what we
sounds
have
idyllic,
now.
right? I mean, really, it's like...
Can you imagine only paying $60 to watch something? What a world. So that's the good news for Max, right? The bad news is that Principal Mazer has in fact called his father, and his father, I will remind you, is Goofy.
Goofy.
From Disney.
From Disney.
So that's always going to be bad news.
The Goof himself. Hey, now, but Goofy was the most serious on this phone call because this principal is a grade A turd.
Oh, yeah. We'll get there in just a second.
Yeah.
So, over at Goofy's job, Goofy is a department store photographer. And they don't say it by name. But, and again, this is peak 1990s. He works in a Kmart where they have the blue light specials.
Yeah. Well, he works in an unnamed department store.
That has blue light specials. It's Kmart.
Blue light special.
It's Kmart. You can't lie to me. I've been in a Kmart before. I remember the blue light specials.
Yeah.
And this job is depicted in this movie as the single most stressful job on planet Earth. And to his credit, Goofy is very good at it. He's like taking pictures of a baby and he's got his little, like, all these little toys that he's using and he's doing silly things to make the baby smile and he gets some good pictures and the baby goes back to its mom and the mom is like, oh, you're so good with kids. And then Pete comes out and Pete sucks with kids. He puts Velcro on a toddler's butt, sticks her to the surface. She's mad. She's crawling away without her diaper on. It's a whole mess. And while all this is happening, Pete is giving Goofy the worst parenting advice that anyone has ever given. So these two men are both, as far as we know, single fathers. We never see or hear anything about Max or PJ's moms, any other parents in their lives. As far as we know, these two men are in very similar situations.
Except financially. For some reason, Pete has all this money.
Pete's got a lot of money. Do you think Pete, like, married an heiress and then, like, killed his wife? That's my conspiracy theory about Pete.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, because he's got, like, this souped-out camper and stuff later.
Pete's got a lot more money than Goofy does, and we don't know why, because they have the same job. Anyway.
It's really weird.
Goofy, in this conversation, is, like, kind of aware that he's not connecting with his son very well, and he kind of worries about the consequences of that. And it's clear from the way that he is interacting with the little kid that that's his sort of forte as a parent, is being able to deal with little kids and make them laugh and make them smile. And so there probably was a time when he and Max got along really well, but as Max has grown up, he's out of his league now. He doesn't really know how to connect with him. But essentially, he still sort of believes that he can trust Max not to misbehave. He thinks Max is a good kid, which is true.
Yes.
Max is a good kid. He does occasionally misbehave, though. And Pete tells Goofy that his philosophy is that kids need to be controlled, completely controlled, or they are going to end up in gangs and become violent and degenerate. The phrase "under your thumb" comes up a lot in this movie. That is Pete's mantra, is you gotta keep them under your thumb, Goof. Gotta keep them right under your thumb so they can't end up in the gutter. That's what he says. Goofy doesn't agree with this up until the point that he gets the phone call from Principal Mazer. And the reason that phone call changes his mind is because Principal Mazer, in true peak 90s suburban fear-mongering fashion, tells him that instead of being like, your son pulled a prank and it was disruptive and a little bit dangerous and we would like to talk to you about it, he says that Max is dressed like a gang member and that if he doesn't straighten up, he will wind up in the electric chair. Please welcome to the stage the first use of the soundboard on this program. Yeah, so that's the go-to threat for Principal Mazer. Not that his son is going to have detention, not that he's going to have to do summer school, not even that he's going to end up getting arrested. Straight to the electric chair.
Horrible. I mean,
for using a fog machine during an assembly.
Well, it doesn't matter what he did. It's like a really unbelievable thing to say to anyone, let alone a parent. But, ugh, God.
Yeah, really awful. And so Goofy, perhaps understandably, panics and decides that the best way to save his son's life, because in Goofy's mind, those are now the stakes. His son is going to die if he doesn't do something. He's going to take Max on a road trip. And not just any road trip, the exact road trip that Goofy's father took him on when he was a kid, in the hopes that this like wholesome fishing and camping and roadside attractions will prevent Max from being executed by the state. So we have this idea that nature is going to be this healing, purifying force in this kid's life. Max, as you perhaps could guess, does not want to go.
No. He's got pay-per-view plans, buddy.
Pay-per-view? It's so expensive. Stacy's parents are going to have to take out a second mortgage to watch this concert, Dad. Oh, God. So Max is like, sounds like you're going to have a great time, Dad. Send me a postcard. And Goofy is like, absolutely not. And just like wrangles him into the car.
Does kidnap him. He kidnaps him.
Yeah. Well, first he does the like, this is my least favorite Goofy moment in the movie. This really disappoints me. When he's just sort of like, oh, you don't want to come? Guess I'll just go all by myself and I'll just sit in the car alone and I'll sit in the boat alone and I'll put up the tent alone. And Max is just like, yep, sounds great. Anyway, bye, Dad. So Goofy does forcefully put his son into the car and strap him down. But first, Max does need to go and tell Roxanne that he can't go to the party with her because there aren't phones. So he has to just like go tell her to her face.
Welcome to the 90s, everyone. You either wrote a letter or drove up to their porch.
Now, kids, back in the day, you didn't have a phone you could just keep in your pocket. You had to go to your friend's house and knock right on the door and talk to their terrifying father.
Kids, and I know what you're wondering. A blue light special was when a light went off in the store and whatever product was under it, if the light was shining blue, for the whole time that it was shining, you got a special discount on it. Yeah. So it was like a really exciting kind of thing to be in the Kmart when the blue light special happened.
Well, now, kids, Kmart is a department store, kind of like a worse Target.
Yeah, it's sort of, so a department store is sort of like one genre that you click on Amazon where like it just a certain amount of goods and services are provided in one location, but it's a physical location that you walk around with your body and you actually put items into a cart and purchase them in those days with paper money. How
long do we have to do this before we get a de facto AARP membership?
Mine's in the mail. Anyway, back to the movie.
So Max goes up to Roxanne's house and is like, I can't go to the party with you. And because Roxanne is a teenage girl, her immediate reaction is like, oh, it's because you don't like me. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. And like, you have to make up this story about your dad taking you on a road trip to cover up for the fact that you hate me so much.
Yeah, is that relatable, by the way? Is that a real thing? Because that's what I would think if the girl that I liked, who I kind of thought was like out of my league, came to me and was like, oh, my mom says we have to go on this Eat, Pray, Love trip across the country.
My mom is taking me to India.
Ugh, it doesn't, gosh, right? It's so random.
I
would feel like I was being blown off for sure.
Maybe if it weren't for the fact that like the car is right outside her house
out there with his like camping shit on.
With a bunch of camping gear on top of the car, like
right.
That would probably be a clue to me. But I am also the person who as a teenager, was the worst at, like, figuring out ways to let people down easy. So I don't know what, like, a good way to do that would be. One time, a guy was like, hey, do you want to go see the movie Avatar with me sometime? Because I was in high school when the movie Avatar came out. And my response was, oh, I can't. My grandma's coming. And he was like, I didn't say a day. And I was just sort of like...
Yeah, well, she doesn't have long left, so...
No, I was just like, sometimes my grandma stays for a long time, which is not true, because at the time we lived like 20 minutes away from my grandma.
Yeah, it's not easy for you to let people down gently. You just have to lie your face off to them instead.
So what I'm saying is...
You have to wash my grandma's hair for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, sorry. God, I don't know what to tell you. So I don't know that I understand Roxanne's reaction. I do understand Max's reaction as soon as he sees her, like, freaking out, though, which is to come up with the most outrageous lie that he can and double down on it as hard as possible. So what he says is that my dad is taking me on this road trip and we're going to the Powerline concert. Not only that, my dad knows Powerline. They used to be in a band together. Not only that, I'm going to get up on the stage with Powerline and I'm going to wave to the cameras just for you at the most famous musician on Earth's concert. And Roxanne is like, oh, cool.
Yeah. Everything you just said was the most unrelatable, unbelievable part of the movie to me. It was because it's like, what an obvious lie that she believed for no reason, and then he, like, quested after this
I tell you what
thing.
I would have done in that situation is I would have been like, get out of the car, Goofy. You come tell this girl why I have to disappoint. Like, I would have marched my dad up there and been like, all right, Dad. No, tell her, Dad. You're letting this girl down. She has to go to a pay-per-view party by herself now. Think about that, Dad. She does go to the party by herself, though. I will say, spoiler alert, Roxanne, ride or die. She goes to the party by herself.
She goes with Stacy.
Well, it's Stacy's house.
She lives there. Yeah.
All right, so road trip commences. Max and Goofy in the car. Max is pouting. Goofy is trying to, like, play car games. Not working. They fight over music. Goofy is a little bit country. Max is a little bit rock and roll.
Nice.
Are these crazy kids ever going to get along?
I don't know.
No, they're not.
How many people have they killed with their vehicles so far?
I don't know. It's not made clear, but
What's the body
Goofy
count?
is an extremely reckless driver.
Unbelievable.
This man should not have a license.
No.
It is out of control.
It's bad.
It's very dangerous. Also dangerous is the possum-themed amusement park that they go to.
Hell with this place.
In, like, a Louisiana swamp or something. This
so
is
weird.
It's giving Five Nights at Freddy's in a swamp.
Big time.
But possum-themed. Like,
all possum. Oops, all possums.
Oops, all possums. It's so scary. I'm 100% with Max on this one. I would not have gotten out of the car. It's just like, it's a horror show.
It was
very
like a
scary.
scene out of Squidbillies for a second, you know? If any of our listeners watch that unfortunate creation.
Oh, dear. I mean, to make things worse, Goofy is like, you know, he's being goofy. He's getting too into it. He's embarrassing Max, and then Max gets, like, bullied by a redneck child, and then everyone is just standing in a circle around Max laughing at him. It's just bad.
It's bad.
It's a bad scene.
It's real bad.
And Max, I think, is understandably upset. But fortunately, someone is here to save the day. Who is it? It's Pete and his giant camper.
Oh, my God. Inexplicably giant camper with, like, the fold-out helipad, jacuzzi, bowling alley.
It has a bowling alley on the top. It's got a pool. Yeah, so, again, we don't know how Pete got his money, but we do know that he has not hired, like, a cleaning staff because he is just making PJ do labor for him. Again, PJ not having a good time, living in fear of his father.
Well, it's for the boys' benefit, Goof.
You gotta keep him under your thumb,
Gotta
Goof.
keep him right under your thumb, Goof.
Right, so they can't end up in the gutter. Get it? Because we're bowling on my camper.
I like the gutter.
Yeah, so once again, Pete is trying to convince Goofy to mistrust and abuse his son, which Goofy is like, I think I'll just take him fishing instead. So Goofy takes Max out fishing by the lake, and he's trying to teach him the perfect cast, which is this fishing cast that has been passed down from goof to goof for generations. Max is not engaged with this. Max does not care. Max is still unhappy. You know who loves the perfect cast, though? Bigfoot.
Is he a big fan?
He's a big fan.
Wow. Yeah,
Oh,
Bigfoot's in
man.
this movie, everybody. Yay!
Yay! Welcome to the stage, Bigfoot.
Wow! Yeah, Bigfoot! I'm a huge fan! Wow, Bigfoot! What? Wow!
That's a really good PJ impression.
Wow! Thanks, Max!
Wow.
Thanks, Max! Thanks, Max!
Now it's going a little Mickey. Mickey's not in this one. God damn it. So Bigfoot's in this one, and he is serving as the classic creative writing conflict resolution trope, which is just an external force that makes two characters sit in a car together and talk to each other because they can't leave. So
Lock them in a
Bigfoot
bank vault.
is rifling through their stuff. He's got their underwear on his head. He's listening to Staying Alive on their Walkmans.
That's great.
He's doing puppet shows with their socks, but they're stuck in the car. And they have this kind of nice moment where they, for some reason, the only food they have in the car is alphabet soup, which he heats up with a cigarette lighter.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that when I was young, so my parents didn't smoke, so I didn't know why the cigarette lighter was called a cigarette lighter until, as all kids eventually do, I fucked around and found out what it does.
Hilarious.
While sitting alone in the car at some point where my mom was in the grocery store or something.
Boy, howdy.
But they talk about how when Max was little, he called alphabet soup Hi Dad soup because he would rearrange the little noodle letters to spell Hi Dad. And it's this kind of nice moment where they were like, oh, we used to have some good times together, didn't we? Eating soup. And you can kind of see a sense of how their relationship has changed and how sad Goofy is that he's kind of lost touch with the part of his son who liked him, I guess. So the resolution of the scene is that Max does this again, like rearranges the letters to say Hi Dad. And I like this moment in the story from a writing standpoint because the big problem with Max and Goofy's relationship is that they are not talking to each other about what they actually want or need or are afraid of. And that is where the entire conflict comes from. And I like that this moment is showing Max, like, greeting his father, like saying, Hi, Dad, like, for the first time in a very long time, I see you. And they have not, like, gotten fully over the hump, but there is this kind of sense that, like, this relationship is not so far gone that it can't be saved, basically. And then Max ruins it.
Yeah.
So as soon as Goofy falls asleep, Max gets out the paper map. Now, kids, a paper map is like a GPS, but it lived in your glove box instead of on your phone. Because if you remember from earlier, phones hadn't been invented yet. This was 1995.
No phones.
So Max erases the route that's written on the map and changes it so that the end destination is Los Angeles. Again, not a good plan on Max's part. Would be pretty easy for Goofy to look at the map and be like, hey, wait a minute. You erased the line I drew before and drew a new one. But that doesn't happen because the next morning, Goofy is like, I've made so much progress with my son that I'm going to announce to this entire diner that Max gets to be the navigator for our road trip.
Yeah.
But this is a nice moment because it signals that Goofy kind of feels like they've made some progress as they commence on what looks to me to be like a kick-ass road trip. This is like me as a 30-something person who can't just like go on months-long road trips whenever I want to. This trip looks great. They go fishing, they go camping, they go to the beach, they go to an amusement park, they go to a monster truck rally, they go on a tour of New Orleans, they go to a baseball cave. A baseball cave? A baseball game.
A baseball cake?
They eat a baseball cake.
Yum.
And they go into a cave, which I shouldn't have put last because it doesn't sound as exciting as the other.
Spelunking.
But I like a cave. So this trip sounds incredible to me, and I think Max is not grateful. Anyway, that's...
No, I agree.
beside
I
the
think
point.
he's a punk ass for most of this movie where, like, because once you're in it, what's the use of resist? Like, you're in
Yeah.
a state park somewhere. you're not driving back. Like, no, there's no like bad behavior you can do, but like I was 15 once, you know, like you get locked into a mindset of like, man, I don't know, man. I'm just like, I don't even want to be here, man.
Yeah. And you're just kind of seeing how long you can maintain that bad attitude for, despite the fact that it is actively exhausting, and it would just be easier to at least be neutral. Just like look out the car window and be like, I feel nothing about this, but you feel like you have to. You've made such a big deal about it before. You have to keep being like, no, I'm still mad.
It's like
gosh, I'm still mad.
Emotional inertia. You know, because and it's just so hard to let go and be like, actually, like I'm the one making this a bad experience right now. Yeah. Like, oops. I could just be like, oh, okay, we're going fishing today with not much else to do here. I guess that's what we're doing. Here I am. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, Max does not want to take the path of least resistance here. And to be fair, neither does Goofy, because it turns out that him letting Max be the navigator was a little bit of a trick, because Goofy does in fact know the route that they're supposed to take, and they come to a fork in the road where there's one exit going towards Idaho, one going towards California, and he's got Pete in the back of his head saying like, oh, your son's like, I don't know, he might have changed the map. He might be a bad kid after all. And him just being like, no, Max is good. He is going to send us towards Idaho and purity and not to the sinful den of California with all of its earthly delights. And Max is like sweating it, coming down to that intersection like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And he tells him to go towards California, which Goofy could very easily have not done. Goofy is controlling the car.
Right.
He could have gone on the route he knew he was supposed to go on and just been like, hey, Max, why'd you try to get me to go to California? What's in California that you want to see so badly?
Right.
Goofy doesn't do that.
Right. Emotional inertia, same thing. He hasn't asked up until this point.
Yeah, he's not going to start asking now.
Why would he? Yeah, he just gets pissed.
Yeah, so he does another, like, I don't know, it's sort of not even exclusively dadly thing. I feel like I've been in the car with my parents before where they got mad enough that they had to pull over and stop the car and just kind of pace for a second. We saw it in the Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Sometimes you got to stop your car and pace for a little bit and be in your feelings.
Hey, don't drive in your feelings.
Yeah.
Pull over.
Yeah.
Count to 10. Actually, for real, don't drive if you're so pissed off you can't think well.
Don't drive angry. It's genuinely pretty unsafe.
Yeah.
And Goofy is like very in his feelings. So he is not going to ask Max why he changed the map, tried to get him to go in a different direction, because Goofy is, like, feeling stupid in this moment and is, like, embarrassed about feeling stupid, and he assumes in that moment that Max's intention was to make him feel stupid. He says something to that effect, like, you just think I'm so dumb I won't notice.
You failed my map puzzle.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah, and of course that wasn't Max's intention, but nobody has asked Max what his intention was yet.
Right, it's ridiculous.
And Max also hasn't volunteered the information about why this concert was so important to him.
They've had so much time to talk, too. That's the craziest thing. It's ridiculous. And Max tells all this stuff to PJ.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that he's incapable of communicating it. It's just a classic story of these two aren't talking to each other. Goofy is so trapped in trying to recreate this particular trip that brought him closer to his father, but he's just not realizing that the special sauce was the fact that they were doing stuff together, not whatever the stuff was. That's the problem. Yeah. He's trapped in nostalgia, and he's not just using this trip as an opportunity to, like, do things Max wants to do. Because when we see that montage of them going to monster truck rallies and stuff, they're having a blast. They're having a good time in that montage. It's not Max just being, like, begrudgingly...
Well, it's mostly Goofy having a good time and Max being dragged along.
Is it really? Yeah, I thought when they were doing oh, really? I thought they were, like, getting into it then, but...
Well, it's another one of those things where it's like...
Like, before the diner announcement.
Would he be willing to admit that he was having a good time in any of those excursions? Probably not to Goofy's face.
Gotcha.
And part of the problem is that Goofy's father probably took him on this trip as a way to get closer and to, like, have a fun time together. Not because he thought Goofy was going to get murdered by the state.
Right.
Like, the fear that is hanging over Goofy is getting in his way, too. Sure. He's got his own, like, pride issues, and then he's got on top of that this terror of,
That's
like,
true.
If I don't do a good enough job on this road trip, my son is going to become a delinquent and a criminal, and he's going to die, and I didn't save him.
That does explain
that's the fear.
His neurosis a little bit about, like, replicating the trip exactly. Is like, this is a thing that I know helped me turn out okay. It's the only recipe that I can verify.
Yeah.
So if I deviate from it, he's screwed. And like that urgency, that makes a lot more sense as to why he is so like laser focused on this route and this plan, this itinerary.
Yeah, so Goofy is outside the car, he's pacing around, he's mad, but Goofy, in all things, is still Goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did forget to put his car in park, and it does roll off of a cliff into, according to the Wikipedia page, the Colorado River.
God dang.
So the boys are trying to keep the car from rolling off the cliff, but of course it's a car, so they just kind of end up falling off a cliff with the car into the river, and now they are floating down the river on top of the car, and this is finally a dire enough situation to force these two to talk to each other, where they sort of reveal what's actually going on with each of them, which is Goofy basically says, like, I will always think of you as my son, no matter what happens. Like, I want you to do whatever you want with your life, but I just want to be a part of it. Because that's been his whole thing, is he just doesn't feel like he's a part of Max's life anymore. And Max is like, great, let me tell you what's going on in my life right now and why I am acting the way that I'm acting. And so he tells him about the situation with Roxanne, and this is like ridiculous lie that he told, and now he's like, she's gonna hate me because I told the wildest possible lie. And Goofy, in a true ride or die, unparalleled ride or die, once Goofy gets with the program, he is so with the program that he's just like, oh, nah, man, we're gonna get you to that concert. I'm gonna get you up on that stage. Don't even worry about it. No sweat. I mean, don't even worry about it.
He's Team Max 10,000%. Like, there's no doubt about that. And, like, it's been kind of a pitfall for him for most of the movie. But at this point, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to be a radical dad. Let's go.
Yeah, all right.
We're here.
That sounds like a real Goofy situation you've gotten yourself into. Fortunately, I am something of an expert in Goofy situations.
But before we get to that...
they fall off a waterfall.
Yeah, they almost nearly die.
They almost die again.
Like, for real, this is not like a yucky dog.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a bad one. No, they're gonna
off
die.
A waterfall. But Max saves his dad using
the perfect podcast.
Nope, try again.
The perfect cast.
There you go. Because secretly, Max has been listening this whole time, and he has been paying attention and learning.
And he does value, presumably, the time spent with his father. It's just that mostly he was trying to hang out with his hot girl.
Yeah. So after that point, we kind of jump cut to the concert where we don't see whatever like Ocean's 11 shenanigans have to go into this, but they get backstage at this concert, which has the laxest possible security. They're in like instrument cases that just get taken backstage, and like, there you go.
Hilarious.
They're backstage at the concert.
How'd they get in the case in the tour bus? Like, to get, it's like master of disguise, the goofs.
Goofy is Goofy. He bumbled his way in. He's there. And so Max is kind of getting chased around backstage. Not Goofy, though.
Not Goofy.
Goofy just, like, gets out on stage with Powerline, who's in the middle of a song, and who for some reason doesn't, like, stop the concert and say, like, hey, security, could you get this strange man off the stage? He's just sort of like, oh, a dude? What's up, man? Let's dance together. Yeah. That's cool. And then Max ends up on the stage, and they're doing a dance that's like the perfect cast, and it's, do you get it? Because it's Goofy's thing and Max's thing together.
Yeah, it's a
symbolism.
And
they're sharing.
It's a symmetry.
And also the most famous musician on earth is just there and being like, you guys have a really great relationship. Let's dance.
Hey, to all you famous musicians out there, I'm going to go ahead and encourage you to adopt more of a Powerline mindset when your fans rush the stage, particularly if they know the choreography and are like dancing with you and like contributing to your brand in a meaningful way. Yeah. Let them go. I know that doesn't happen all that often, but it sure did happen here. And guess who saw him on the television?
Roxanne.
Yeah, and Stacy.
And Stacy, who's also there and kind of has the hots for the Cheese Whiz guy for some reason, which is...
Because he's an intellectual.
He's not. He's voiced by Pauly Shore.
Because he's a tried nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, she's into it.
The lovable doof.
I think she just maybe wants the hookup.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Cheese Whiz is definitely standing in for Weed in this instance. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or it's actually just Cheese Whiz and he's legitimately doing a bunch of whippets. The thought occurred. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, he inadvertently fulfills his promise, which is like kind of a bad message.
Yeah,
Probably
he
the
doesn't
worst message
deserve
of this
to
film.
have fulfilled that promise, but they wanted to show the cool concert at the end.
Yeah, sure.
They wanted that big set piece, which it's very good. It's a great song.
Mm-hmm.
Max comes home triumphant. He's supported by his father. Their car is fucked, but what are you gonna do? And so he goes back to Roxanne's house to presumably tell her the truth, and she basically reacts by saying like, I mean, that's fine, but I liked you anyway.
Nice.
Like, you didn't need to go to California and lie to your dad and have this huge cathartic moment at a waterfall. Like, I would have just dated you anyway. I think your laugh is cute.
Yuck.
And then Goofy lands in the ceiling of her house.
Yeah, he does that big yeah.
Yeah. Roll credits.
Yeah, and that was it. That was a goof move.
That is a Goofy movie. Someday we will stop drawing from the well of A, movies about 90s fatherhood, and B, movies that I watched as a kid constantly and shaped me profoundly, but which you had never heard of before.
But that day is not today.
That day is
dear
not
listener.
today, because again, this movie is, broadly speaking, about fathers and sons. Much and more specific than Jurassic Park was, I think. It's specifically about single fathers and teenage sons, and even more specifically about single fathers and teenage sons in the 90s. So we talked in the Jurassic Park episode about the transformation that fatherhood went through in the public imagination, at least in the United States in the 1990s. And I won't go through all of that again.
But you should, and
go listen to our Jurassic Park episode.
that one.
Yeah.
Go do that.
But there were these large-scale conversations about how engaged fathers should be in the lives of their children and how they should be shifting away from just being financial providers to being emotional caretakers as well. And that change was spurred, at least in part, by, let's call it what it is, fear-mongering on the part of mass media about issues like, gang violence and drug use and so forth. We can think back to the LA Times article that we brought up in the Jurassic Park episode, No Longer Missing in Action by Sheryl Stolberg, about a father who decided he needed to connect with his kids after a series of things happened, which was people got killed in their neighborhood, somebody brought knives to his kid's school, someone with pierced everything hassled his son, and then one of his kids saw marijuana.
Glimpsed marijuana.
Yeah, so all of those equally terrible things were happening in this suburb in the 90s, and so all of these fathers were like, oh no, I gotta talk to my kids. That was like almost a Doc Brown impression. I swerved away at the last second. You're welcome. And a Goofy movie definitely reflects a lot of those fears. Most starkly in that scene in the principal's office after he plays his little prank, which is like very technologically impressive and could maybe, be the springboard for a conversation about like, hey, you seem like a really creative kid who, maybe would like to be engaged in like music production or, something of that matter. And like, let's find a less disruptive way for you to channel these impulses. No, the principal's immediate reaction is like, you're gonna go to prison.
Yeah.
And not just that, you're going to end up in, where is he gonna end up, Spencer?
The electric chair.
The electric chair. That's such an awful thing to say to a kid. I can't even.
To anyone.
Oh
It's a horrible,
my
like, this part of the movie really freaked me out, honestly. It was
Yeah.
like, because to your point, I feel like there's kind of two principles that could be represented here. One is the sort of person that we see of the sort of like urban environment, lower income inner city school that's like the whole prime directive is like, no, fall in line, follow the rules, don't fall off the wagon, don't get messed up, don't get killed or go to jail or whatever. Or there's like the Robin Williams educator and administrator who's like, follow your passion. Like, you're acting, you're coloring outside of the lines. Embrace your creativity and let's channel that so you can be the next power line. And like, that's not the kind of response that kids like Max.
Well, and that's the thing is you mentioned that first archetype of a principal belonging in sort of a more urban environment. That's not where they live in an Ohio suburb.
Mm-hmm.
There is no threat of gang violence here. He has not done anything to insinuate that drugs were involved in any of his decision making. He didn't do anything dangerous. He didn't hurt anyone.
Well, he did some extremely dangerous, but albeit really
true.
Sweet things. But like, they were hella dangerous. And like a real life principal would be way more worried about like insurance and lawsuits and stuff.
He was like swinging around on a line above an audience. Like, okay, so it was dangerous, but it was not like intended to terrorize.
No.
That was not his intention.
No, whereas the principal's spiel, I feel like, to your point, is very much tailored to the student he's speaking to and his like perceived identity of who the student is and his home life and all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, we have this story about 90s fatherhood where men are like haunted by these specters of extreme violence and extreme consequences that don't necessarily have anything to do with their actual lived experience. But the message that they're getting is that by failing to engage with your son on an emotional level, you are leaving him vulnerable to the worst consequences that the suburban imagination could possibly conjure, which is a message that I imagine hits particularly hard for single parents who don't have the benefit of another person to kind of help take care of their kids, and for men who have these dual pressures now with the patriarchy saying you need to go earn as much money as you can and you need to always be working and always be providing, and now also you do need to be physically present and emotionally present at all times, and you have to be doing both of those things at all times or your kid is gonna go to the electric chair. That, I imagine, is just like a level of pressure that is untenable and could lead to some extremely goofy behavior,
well,
perhaps.
It's a classic double bind. Like, you can't possibly fulfill both. And, like, those aren't the only roles that are necessary for the proper development of a child either. You know, I mean, those are kind of like the sort of archetypal binaries that we think of, mom and dad. But, like, that's just, like, not a realistic experience for a lot of people. It's like, it's those sort of archetypes and many more. And, with just Goof there, working his menial job, like he physically can't be in all those places at once. Gosh darn, it's lucky enough he's got so much vacation time.
Yeah, I mean,
or else this movie wouldn't have happened.
Man, you could really make good money at a department store back in the day, huh? Yeah. What a world.
I know.
And the interesting thing about how this message hit when this movie came out. This movie was not a huge, like, blockbuster when it came out. It's not one of the mainline Disney movies. It came out during the era referred to as the Disney Renaissance, which is, like, when The Lion King and The Little Mermaid and, all of those movies were coming out.
What year was this?
Goofy movie came out in 1995.
Wow.
Yeah. This came out in that peak era of the Disney Renaissance, though. And it stands alone both because it's not a mainline Disney movie. It was not made by like Disney Animation Studios. It was kind of made by one of their little subsidiaries. And it specifically, the audience that it found was Black audiences in the US. There's actually an episode of the show Atlanta that's this sort of like mockumentary episode about this fictitious Black executive at Disney who championed the production of a Goofy movie. And like in that episode, he kind of like he loses his mind a bit in the effort. But that is a testament to the fact that this was sort of a sleeper hit among Black audiences. And it's interesting because Goofy as a character has always kind of been connected in some pretty unfortunate ways originally to Black characters and Black experiences. He is meant to be read as a Black character. He has been since the beginning, which is something that like I didn't know as a kid. That's not an impression that I got. But I found an article from The Independent, which came out around the time that this movie came out. It's sort of a review of the movie. But it talks a little bit about the history of Goofy as a character and his evolution over time. So the article is called "So What is Goofy?" It's by a writer named Nick Hasted.
It's a great question.
Yeah, what is Goofy? There's an answer to that question, it turns out. So this is a quote from that article. Quote, "In a memo written in 1934, Disney animator Art Babbitt told all, 'Think of the goof as a composite of an everlasting optimist, a gullible good Samaritan, a half-wit, a shiftless good nature,' here he uses an insensitive term for a black person, 'boy, and a hick.' He told his staff, 'His brain is rather vapory. He laughs at his own jokes because he can't understand any others. He is very courteous and apologetic, and his faux pas embarrass him, but he tries to laugh off his errors. He talks to himself because it is easier for him to know what he is thinking if he hears it first.' As to what he looked like, Babbitt admitted, quote, 'a vague similarity between the goof's head and Pluto's, but their animation was to be entirely different. One is a dog, the other human.'" So there's an answer to a couple of questions.
So what is goof? A racism.
Yeah. His characterization when he was first created in the 1930s was supposed to evoke this sort of minstrel show, really awful caricature of a black man.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Like,
yeah,
it's
really unfortunate.
I never really thought about any of this either. And truthfully, I watched a lot of these like racist, like overtly racist cartoons as a kid that my parents and grandparents had just like recorded on a VHS tape or whatever. It just shows to go you that like there's a lot of subtle and then super subtle, just sort of like forgotten racial texts and artifacts and stuff out there. And like this one, when you look at it longer than 5 minutes, is like, yeah. As soon as you were like, what is it, Goofy? I was like, oh my God, is it
oh no.
Is it okay.
Yeah. Well, and Disney is such an entity that does not, how do I want to say this? At their inception, they were very sort of like proud and championing these caricatures, and then over the years they have done everything in their power to kind of bury it and make sure that that doesn't rise to the surface. And it's interesting that a Goofy movie keeps some of that original, like, no, this is a black character and his stories are going to be black stories, but it evolves over time to shed a lot of the more harmful stereotypes and then like strangely keep a core part of the experience that ended up resonating with the audiences, 50 years later. It's just kind of interesting that this like incredibly unfortunate part of their history has carried through, perhaps despite their best efforts.
It follows a familiar pattern, and I won't harp on this for too long, but like one thing we do know about minstrelsy is that the culprit necessarily is not the stereotype or the archetypes or the jokes. It's like who's wielding those sometimes and like to what extent and for what audiences. And so like we see a lot of the same minstrel archetypes repeated throughout time in different media. And some more recent ones in my lifetime have become popular through things like The Chappelle Show. That's a huge, great example that I'm really familiar with. The Boondocks is another example that I'm familiar with. Other people out there might be more familiar with like Tyler Perry's works. That's another great. Medea is a classic minstrel archetype. Like, so my point is, they're throughout history and even toward the beginning of the minstrel tradition, they were, in addition, performed by black artists or produced by black artists for black audiences for reasons different than like humiliating humor.
Right.
Is a way to sort of, is like more of an escapist humor, or satire even. Yeah. And so like with that in mind, it makes perfect sense to me why contemporary black audiences could latch on to the Goofy movie as like, here's this goof at heart, but then the story built around him in this modern setting is something that actually, oh wait, on the level of myth, like we can relate to this interpersonally, as many people can.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you talk about satire because that's what happened with Goofy almost immediately as a character in the Disney canon. Is by the 1940s, they had started using him as a character in these this series of like tongue-in-cheek short films called the How To series, which featured Goofy like doing things badly and then kind of looking at the camera and winking like, I'm just such a disaster, aren't I? Isn't it so crazy that I can't do any of these things right? Wink. And so almost immediately they were like, this character is of more use to us if he is a little bit self-aware and poking fun at himself instead of just literally being there to kind of bumble around for no particular reason. And of course, by the 90s, he has kind of become an adult and become a little bit more of a real person. That was just the way that they were using those characters then. Specifically in a Goofy movie, kind of that self-awareness has been taken up to the next level where he is really having to reckon with his own nature. This is another quote from the Independent article. A Goofy movie especially seems determined to force its Depression-era idiot into modern complexity, to test his everlasting optimism to the limit. A lovable half-wit in the 30s, a struggling every goof in the 40s, Goofy's innocence is an embarrassment now. A Goofy movie presents him as a single parent attempting to raise his son Max in a 90s version of the California suburb where Mickey took his gang in 1939. But for Goofy, it is still 1939. His favorite song is a crackly High Hopes. His idea of a bonding road trip with his son is a visit to a creaky entertainment in the mountains, which he remembers from when he was young. The social satire of the how-to Goofy has turned queasily inward. Max's worst nightmare is to grow up like his goof of a dad. It all turns out for the best, of course, but the idea of Disney making a film about how out of place Goofy is in the 90s still catches the breath. Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about before, that Disney is so obsessed with keeping its IP and these iconic characters as relevant and like modern as possible and trying to pretend that they have always been that relevant and they have always been that modern and they have never had anything ugly in their history. It's interesting that this movie managed to slip through as a pointed way of saying that, like, isn't Goofy sort of a ridiculous character? Couldn't he not survive in the real world if he doesn't change substantially? The premise of the Atlanta episode is like, what if there was a black person working for Disney who specifically wanted to make a black movie? And the reason that that's a joke is because, of course, that's not what was happening at the time. They were like, we've got this character. We haven't done anything with him in a long time. We don't really care about him. He's
Everyone
not the
else
one.
Has a movie?
Yeah, he's not making us a ton of money. We'll give this project off to one of our sort of satellite studios and see what they can make with it. And they were just sort of like, it's a Goofy movie. Like, they weren't, the intent was not to be like, we want to make something that speaks to the African American experience.
Yeah, and because like later they did. Like Disney would later do that in multiple ways. With, like The Princess and the Frog
and
comes
in
to
much
mind.
clumsier ways, it must be said.
Yeah. So anyway, as I was just kind of looking through our notes, I was wondering what you thought about that. If this, chicken egg kind of thing. But anyway, so can we jump?
Yeah, let's talk about those the reasons that people give for this movie resonating with Black audiences so much. One is because of the music in the movie. So this movie obviously revolves a lot around music, and specifically this famous musical artist Powerline. And that is a part of the movie that was intended from the beginning to, at the very least, that character was meant to be depicted as Black. So we have an article that I found called The Enduring Legacy of Disney's Black Millennial Classic, a Goofy Movie, by a writer called Austin Williams. And he explains a bit about the history of Powerline, the character, and the person who was originally hired to play him, if you wouldn't mind reading that quote for me.
Indeed. Austin Williams explains that the role of Powerline was originally written for Bobby Brown.
Ooh.
Yeah. Quote, during the first few years of the Disney Renaissance, Brown was pretty much immune to taking L's. By the time The Little Mermaid premiered, the child star turned sex symbol that's a weird sentence, was fresh off the 1988 release of his biggest solo hit to date, My Prerogative. As documented recently in BET's The New Edition story, in the early 90s, Brown's sophomore album, Don't Be Cruel, was doing numbers. He embarked on a wildly successful tour, and then, bum, he married Whitney Houston. The man was truly living his best life, which included being hired to voice the fictional pop sensation Powerline in a Goofy movie. In granting Bobby Brown the sound of its music, the most valuable and recoupable asset of their Renaissance-era films, Disney reinforced the already sturdy merits of a Goofy movie as a decidedly black endeavor.
So, of course, Bobby Brown did not end up being the voice of Powerline.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Some stuff happened.
Really?
The biggest one being that he did go to rehab at the time before the movie was finished. So the filmmakers chose an artist named Tevin Campbell as his replacement.
Oh, yeah. Campbell's two contributions to the film's soundtrack stand out, and what is this, Eye to Eye?
Eye to Eye, that's the song.
Okay, I couldn't remember. Were both produced, recorded, and mixed by David Z, a.k.a. the guy who engineered Prince's best albums throughout his 80s dominance, including Purple Rain. Purple Rain, Purple Rain.
Thank God. I was so worried you wouldn't do a Prince impression in this episode.
You know me too much better than that. Anyway, to continue this quote, the connection between David Zed and Campbell dates back to Campbell's work on Prince's Graffiti Bridge, having previously been a protege of the Minneapolis legend around the time Brown was scorching and the Renaissance was starting.
Yeah, so one way or another, they ended up with a pretty iconic black recording artist as the sound of Powerline. And I mean, I think those two songs in particular are like why this movie has such staying power for me. Perhaps the more significant part of this movie that resonated with people was both the like visual aesthetics and the themes of the movie.
That's right, Kelcee. Again, this is from that Williams article where he says, aesthetically, the cultural references in the film are clear. From the female protagonist being a light-skinned girl named Roxanne, to the white boy named Bobby, voiced by Pauly Shore, love that, getting in just as much trouble as Max, but somehow feeling way less worried about his parents finding out. The world this movie called its home definitely felt familiar for young black boys and young black girls. Even the way the characters' clothes were drawn felt undeniably hip-hop. Max's oversized hoodie might as well have read Hilfiger across the front. Emotionally, the film's plot also felt particular to the African-American experience, with the principal of Max's school calling his father, alleging the teenage boy sent his classmates into a, quote, riotous frenzy, dressed as a, quote, gang member, and advising Goofy to get a handle on the way he raises his son before he ends up, quote, in the electric chair. Consequently, that silly response tore into an already flimsy relationship between a concerned father and his presumed at-risk son. Of the film's storytelling, director Kevin Lima once said, quote, instead of just keeping Goofy one-dimensional as he's been in the past, we wanted to give him an emotional side that would add to the emotional arc. We wanted the audience to see his feelings instead of just his antics.
I don't really have a question about any of this information. I just think it's really interesting that Disney, of all entities, managed, and perhaps we should give the credit more to Kevin Lima and the people who actually made this movie.
Agreed.
That they managed to modernize a character who has historically been racialized as black using these really hurtful stereotypes and caricatures, and didn't end up just like whitewashing him and turning him into like white suburban dad. They still ended up creating a story that reflected some more authentic parts of the black experience, at least in the 90s. It's just kind of a rare Disney W, kind of an unintentional and rare Disney W a little bit.
Yeah. But again, they're like in the era of they can't miss.
Yeah, specifically like selling soundtracks was such a big part of their business model at that time, that they managed to make one that read as black and didn't immediately panic.
Well, good for them.
I guess,
Way to
yeah.
go.
The least amount of credit we can give them, but we'll give it to them, I guess.
Yeah.
let's talk about the sort of heart of this story as it relates to masculinity, which is this question of how terrified fathers and quote-unquote rebellious kids can connect with each other. And I think music in particular is working as such a good metaphor in this story. Both because it is such a like stereotypical source of tension between parents and kids, that sort of like, your old music is garbage, and it's like, all you kids listen to these days is noise. And because on the flip side of things, it is such a good way of building connections between people. Like, that's the whole idea behind a musical, right? Is that, like, when you get to a place where you can no longer express yourself in words, you, like, burst into song. And that's what a musical is.
Like 2 or 3 times a week for me.
Yeah. Here's a question to kind of ease us into this and connect it back to our experience. Was there music or other types of media that you really loved as a kid or a teenager that just, like, drove your parents crazy? Yeah. And I guess that you knew drove your parents crazy.
Let's see. I was probably about 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and this was in the Napster era. And I didn't know anything about that at the time, but Mickey did because he was like 16.
And who is Mickey?
Mickey's my brother.
Okay.
Mickey, my older brother, and he was pirating that music, and he was listening to the rap tunes at the time because he was in high school. And so he was burning CDs and stuff, and that was really cool. And I had the equivalent of a Walkman. It was like a portable CD player, you know? And so I was going with my buddy and his family to Disney World, and we were driving down to Florida, and Mickey burnt me this CD. And I only knew, like, he asked me what songs I wanted on, and I only knew like 4 songs at the time. One of which you can identify with, and I bet this is probably on your list of things that annoyed your parents as well. I'm blue, abba-dee, abba-da, abba-dee, abba-da, abba-dee, abba. Like 6 hours of that road trip was that Eiffel 65 song on repeat. Because I knew that the rest of the CD that he burnt for me wasn't suitable for my friend's parents to listen to. Because it was all explicit lyrics, and I was 9 years old. And we're talking songs like, talking about gin and juice.
Oh,
laid
Lord.
back. Got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. And like, man, like Eminem was on there.
There's nothing funnier to me than the idea of a 9-year-old singing gin and juice.
It was ridiculous. And like, there were all sorts of...
What do you know about having money on your mind?
Nothing.
Get out of here.
Nothing. So it was just like all those rap tunes of the day, fully explicit, misogynistic, just like gun sounds, you know, all these slurs happening. And then every so often you'd hear a song like, I'm blue, abba-dee, abba-dee.
For me, and the reason you reminded me of this is because of that song, I would watch the same movies over and over and over again. And I associate that song with Big Fat Liar with Frankie Muniz. And, oh shit, what's that guy's name? He's the actor who's from, like, Sideways. Paul Giamatti.
Oh, yeah.
And Frankie Muniz and Paul Giamatti. Because he's doing pranks to this guy who stole his screenplay idea. And one of them is that he turns him blue. Physically blue. And that's why I listened to that song over and over again, is because I watched that movie over and over again, and I bet that drove my parents crazy. But that's every generation of parents has this, like, they won't stop watching Cocomelon. I feel like 10 years ago it was Caillou. Everybody hated Caillou. There's always something that it's like, it's for kids, it's not for me, but oh my god, I hate it so much.
Yeah, but like the scene in the Goofy movie where Max listens to Goofy's played out old garbage music is so realistic, because like I was a good sport. I went on lots of road trips with my dad, and I think back to when I first got into music that I would think about sharing with someone now and how laughably silly it would be, like the very beast of Ronnie James Dio. And just like asking my dad about like the days of Zeppelin and stuff. And he's probably sitting there just like, geez. Then when Dad would fondly reminisce about music, he's like, music these days is no good. And like, to their credit, the music that I liked at the time as a kid was on the radio. And
I'm Blue.
But he'd show me stuff like, here's one for all y'all listeners to go look up. Black Oak, Arkansas. Go ahead.
Am I gonna? I do not know this.
Tell me that gravelly voiced hick in a phonograph is not a banger on every song. I think that's the name of the band.
Oh my lord!
So you can enjoy that. Is there a song called Gravel Roads or something?
Let me just read you these names.
Sure.
And these are all from the 1970s, and early 1970s.
I'm going to preface this by saying, thanks, Dad.
Lord have mercy on my soul.
Thanks, Dad.
Hot and Nasty.
Thanks, Daddy.
When Electricity Came to Arkansas.
Appreciate it, Paul.
Uncle Elijah.
Thanks, Dad.
Jim Dandy.
Thanks, Dad.
The Hills of Arkansas. They don't want you to forget that they're from Arkansas. This is important to them.
Thanks, Dad.
Oh, here's one that's just called Hey Y'all.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, do you feel now that you are in your 30s, do you have a little bit of that, like these kids these days with their TikTok dances and their music?
This is why, I definitely do about TikTok and social media and virality. That's something that, like, even growing up.
Virality, not virality.
Oh, that's right. I have virality. They have virality. Anyway, so even growing up in the internet age, like, virality and the social media monster network that we're all webbed in now is still foreign to me. That's not something I'm totally comfortable with. But that's different than aesthetically judging, like, cultural taste and musical taste and stuff. And so, like, my answer to this, the reason I was bringing up radio a minute ago is because there was a time when I really enjoyed thoroughly and genuinely commercialized mainstream poppy music like butt rock on the radio and like other crappy music really on the radio. And so I think, like, now that I'm this age, I've firmly settled into an identity as a little bit of a hipster. Like, if it's pop music that my students are sharing with me, I try not to grumble so much about the music they show me. I get disappointed when they tell me they're really into things that are bad, but I feel a lot better when I share with something that's, like, got some heart or something that's kind of classic. And they get turned on to it, and it resonates with them. And it doesn't matter so much to me that they like Beyonce or Ice Cube or whatever the fuck. I don't care. But they have a starting point from there to then build on and then be attracted to contemporary artists that are at least doing something interesting in a cultural legacy that, like, I respect, or, like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like wholly frivolous or fabricated by an industry, I think is the thing that I look at with some, and I feel like that's probably where my dad was most of the time. Like, he could tell the difference between musicians and artists on the radio, like, or whatever, like, whatever dumb distinction you want to say, but, like, that's so, like, I find it really funny when my students give me garbage music. I find it endearing when they find semi-garbage music that's at least, like, related to what we're trying to do in class, so I'm a lot less likely to roast them. But yeah, I am compelled to kind of, like, educate them. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, like, it's one thing for you to like this, but do you appreciate this in the absence, in the void of, like, real art?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not entirely fair to... I mean, I just think constantly about that bit from The Devil Wears Prada, where it's like, oh, you think this has nothing to do with you, as if there is any part of culture that is fully untouched by the other parts of culture. Like, even the most, like, commercially overproduced sort of soulless pop music that exists in the world comes from a shared legacy of other types of music. Like, we don't get to Powerline without having, like, mambo music first, right? Like, it might get diluted more as time goes on, but it's all connected to each other one way or another. And, like, that is something that you, as a person who incorporates music and music history into your teaching, has an opportunity to connect for your students, is like, this stuff that you like, whatever. If you like it, that's fine. It doesn't have to be for me, but you should know the cultural legacy that it came from and the musical legacy and the theory that's going into it. Because it's not like overproduced pop music has no skill that goes into it. It's just, it's been created by a committee of people wearing suits in a boardroom somewhere and not someone sitting in their garage with a guitar being like, God, I really need to like spill my soul onto this page or whatever.
And a student learning to appreciate music or appraise text of any kind has to learn that difference of like, before you tell me you like this or dislike this or you don't know about or you don't really care about this, you have to learn to appraise it. Meaning like, can you tell me this is overproduced and why? Can you tell me that this is so similar to all these other things it's derivative and why? Or can you, convince me that this is contributing something original and meaningful and why? And like if you haven't thought enough about whatever the thing is, music in this case, like to be able to answer some of those things, then like you don't really have a leg to stand on to say this is good or bad. I mean, I guess you can say like I like it or don't like it. Anyone could say that. That's a fine opinion. You can have that.
Well, let me turn that question around on you then.
All
when
right.
your students share music with you that is not to your personal tastes, whatever that means, does it help you feel connected to your students anymore as people, or do you feel that sort of paternalistic, like, that's not real music, let me show you real music?
Oh, yeah, let me clarify. The reason I want to show them real music is because the connection exists. Like, yes, to your question, I feel like a very sort of like emotional bond possible there. And so my response to the call is to say, yes, you've given me a music.
Now I'm going to give you one.
Let me reciprocate and give you a music. And I hope it changes your opinion in some way of something.
Yeah. Well, and like the worst case scenario in a situation where you are sharing something like that with someone, regardless of what like that relationship that exists there is, if you're students and teachers, if you're parents and kids, if you're just friends, if you're romantic partners, whatever, is like you have learned a thing about that person and you now know something that they like that you didn't know before. And like,
or
that's the ground level, right?
You have new questions about that person. Like, why do they like this?
Well, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think, like, okay, so we just, last year was the Taylor Swift Eras tour, right? And so there were all these pictures of, parents taking their kids to these concerts and they would save up all this money. And, there was this sort of like grumbling and eye rolling from, certain people of a certain age and gender that I won't mention about Taylor Swift popularity and blah, blah, blah.
They probably look like me.
Well,
maybe a little bit older.
But, we would also see all these, like, cute pictures of, like, dads getting dressed up in pink and they're taking their daughters to this concert that their daughter really wants to go to or whatever. And it's just, like, I wanted to take those, people of indeterminate age and gender and just, like, shake them and be like, it's not about Taylor Swift. It's about a parent getting to see their child experience joy.
Yeah.
And, like, yes, going to a Taylor Swift concert is not the only way to do that. I'm not saying it is. They're very expensive tickets and, like, sort of a ridiculous thing. But, like, if that's a thing that will make your kid, like, transcendently happy, and it is a thing that you can do with them, and then for the rest of your life, you have a thing that the two of you get to talk about together forever. You have a mutual experience that even if you're, like, it was long and it was loud and there were all these like girls screaming and my feet hurt and I was wearing a stupid outfit. First of all, you probably are going to find something about a concert experience that you like. And again, worst case scenario is I did a thing with my kid that made them really happy and like now they like me more because I took them to do a thing that made them really happy.
Yeah.
And if that's not what you're looking for as a parent and like whatever, I don't know. I'm not a parent. Maybe that's not a thing that parents want. But like, it seems to me that that's why you have kids. Like that's the moment. Right? Like, I don't know. I guess I don't know why people have kids if not to have those moments with them.
Yeah, Taylor Swift is a really good example, I think, too. Just recently, this last semester, this class where I use a lot of music examples, I focus a lot on hip-hop for various educational reasons. But not all of my students, especially my current institution, are like really necessarily into that genre of music. And some for good reasons and some for whatever reasons, doesn't really matter. But to the Taylor Swift thing, when I was working with our DJ librarian this past semester, he did a workshop where he mashed up a Biggie song that we were listening to, and like then took a request from the crowd, and these two students who, like, I don't know, they were like sort of into the class. They requested that he mix in a Taylor Swift song, and he was like, okay, I'll try. And the Notorious Swift was born, and that day lived on in infamy. And those from then on, those students were like fully engaged. And sure enough, that day and that lesson and those ideas showed up in their like final evaluations and stuff. And and I know it showed up in a variety of different ways. And so like just taking the second, like the fact that I remember Black Oak, Arkansas, and that stupid song says so much more about how I valued the time I spent with my dad and like listening to him on those long, dumb trips. Just like the students' positive response to my class and my teaching had so much to do with that little gesture.
It's meeting a person halfway, which I think that's the crux of these intergenerational conflicts so often, is that like there are mental blocks that both parents and kids can have that keep them from being willing to meet each other halfway. You think of the moment in the movie where like Max is just like doesn't want to be on this road trip, and Goofy is trying to be like, this is the perfect cast, and my father taught it to me and his father taught it to him, and that being like a moment that could have been really lovely. And like, of course, we know that in the end, Max was listening in that moment, but Goofy had not asked him if he wanted to go on a road trip. He didn't ask him if he wanted to go fishing. He didn't ask him why this concert was so important to him or why this party was so important to him. He didn't even ask him, why did you do this prank at school? He had just like made a decision in his own mind about what needed to happen, and he was going to force Max to do it, by God. And so instead of that being a moment where Max is like, I don't really know anything about fishing, but like, this is important to you, and you're my dad, and you're making an effort, so I will also make an effort. It just becomes a moment where he was like, no, I don't want to participate.
Right. You've kidnapped me. I'm a hostage.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in fishing.
Yeah. Whereas if Goofy had been like, you're making some bad choices at school, and I really want the two of us to connect better, and I want to use this car trip opportunity to talk to each other and come to understand each other. If he had framed it in that way, they wouldn't have had that problem. And it wouldn't have been like, I want things my way. No, I want things my way. It could have been like, all right, you get to pick a song on the radio, and then I'll get to pick a song on the radio, and we'll go back and forth. Whatever conflict resolution would have been good earlier in the story.
Yeah. One of the silent ironies I just realized is like Max is so afraid of becoming Goofy, and like we think of that as like he doesn't want to be a bumbling huckster, but one of his key defining actions in this movie, Max, is that he lies. Like, we think about that, or at least I didn't really think about that as a Goofy trait, but that's kind of Goofy's fatal flaw that sets all of these events into motion, is he's not honest with Max at all. If he were honest, he would have talked to him more like he talked to Pete.
Right.
And been like, I'm afraid I don't want you to end up in the electric chair.
Right, yeah.
End of wacky side adventure. We don't need to do this. Like, you can just talk to your son about what this awful principal said. Like, and so like that kind of just dawned on me that is the way that they're similar in a way that Max should be pretty afraid of, is like that unwillingness to be forthright and that, compulsion to twist the truth in your favor. It's a dangerous recipe.
It comes from this mutual fear that they both have, which is that people are going to leave them. They're not going to like them anymore. Like, the reason that Max lies to Roxanne is because he's afraid that she's gonna go to Stacy's party with somebody else, and she's just gonna forget all about him if he's not front of her mind all summer long. And he doesn't like ask her how she feels about him. He's just sort of like, no, I'm going to the concert and I'm gonna be on stage. Yeah. He feels like it's inadequate to just say, my dad wants me to go on vacation with him and so I won't be around. He thinks that that's not good enough somehow. And Goofy manufactures this whole thing because, as he says when they're floating in their car down the river, he's like, I just wanted to be a part of your life, and I couldn't think of any other way to do it than to kidnap you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it counts as kidnapping if it's your own kid, but he does force him into the car, so
You can definitely kidnap your own kid. It's just a matter of the fact that, like, he's the single parent.
Yeah, there's
And
no other custody chain happening there.
Yeah, I just realized, like, how rough. So I was about to say that Goofy has this, like, impending fear of empty nest syndrome, like, that his one true bond is with his son, but actually, like, what he's experiencing is empty nest syndrome while Max is still there. It's this, like, out-of-body experience of having to watch his son be removed from his life, and, like, and he feels powerless to stop that. But then, like, his decision is to, like, do this elaborate yuck.
His tool chest is Goofy. He's Goofy.
Right.
What is he supposed to do?
And then simultaneously, Max has a pretty empty tool chest when it comes to interacting with women because, well,
He doesn't have a female example in his life that we know of.
He's had the goofster, and and so they, like, Max feels this kind of imposter syndrome, and Goofy feels isolated, and just can't imagine a world where that has to continue, where there's, like, for some reason at some age his son, as he knew him and their relationship, had to die, and for this other thing that he hardly recognizes, this teenage Max, to live. And, like, that's such a real parent, like,
oh yeah,
ouchie, like,
yeah.
And it happens at multiple stages in parent-child
One of the
relationships.
many reasons I don't want to be a parent is because, like, God, it's just kind of a little sad all the time. You're like, this is the last time that's going to happen. This is the last time this is the last time I'm going to pick you up.
Yeah, I can't even handle the look of a dog when they pee on the carpet and they know that they shouldn't have. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like,
how am I supposed to send a kid to college?
Yeah. We both have to deal with this now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So this kind of leads me into my big picture question. Thinking holistically, what message do you think dads, teens, anybody else could take away from the Goofy movie in the year 2024?
I think the last thing we talked about was really important, and that's, like, allow yourself to be vulnerable with the people you love and trust. Mm-hmm. Like, this movie isn't trying to say you need to wear your heart on your sleeve with everyone. But in the case of Goofy and Max, neither one of them felt confident in their relationship with the other at multiple times in the movie.
Yeah.
To tell them the truth or to confide in them or anything like that. And that's what drove the plot and increased the tension at every turn. And so I think the big lesson is, like, if you're a father or if you're an older male mentor, role model, be receptive, which is a thing that men aren't taught typically. And, like, I'll connect it to martial arts here just real quick, but, like, yin and yang are traditionally thought of as feminine and masculine, like, poles, and, like, in electrical engineering we have feminine and masculine things. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's this binary here, and the feminine is described in martial arts philosophy as the receptive force. We think of, like, the earth that we plant things in and it grows, but it's like, yeah, but also the whole message is to master oneself. You're supposed to be both. You're supposed to be both, and, like, you're not just supposed to be the creative masculine huckster. You also have to be receptive to whatever's happening, and in this case, receptive to a changing relationship and the truths that your son or your loved ones want to tell you, but they might just need to work up to it. And if you're the son, you or the whoever, you have to trust that the person who has taken this role of responsibility over you, with you, for you, whatever, like, does actually have your best interest at heart. And even if they don't like the shitty music that you like, or, like, the book that you want to recommend or whatever, or, like, this life path, this career choice that you want to go on, you have to trust that they're at least willing to discuss it with you rationally, openly, honestly, or they're, like, that they deserve the chance to be a part of some of these big decisions. And that's a kind of openness, receptiveness that I mean is like, you have to be willing to let other people in, you know, and ask for help, I guess, you know.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think of the quote from The Bear where the character Richie is talking to his daughter and he's just like, Daddy loves Taylor Swift too, I just needed a break. You gotta be willing to both listen to the other person and like every so often somebody else gets to put something on the radio. Every so often somebody else gets to pick the movie and you don't have to like it, but you do have to listen to it and hear them out. And then once you have done that, you then sort of have the right to say, okay, now I would like to do the thing that I want to do. Right. Yeah, I think there is one more quote I want to read here. My recommendation for fathers and sons, if you need a thing to do together that might help you bond, is maybe watch the Goofy movie. I found an interview from Entertainment Weekly with Bill Farmer, who's the voice actor for Goofy, that suggests that that is the role that this movie has played in people's lives. So this is Bill Farmer. He says, I've probably done close to 4,000 projects for Disney, but a Goofy movie was unlike any other project that I've worked on over the last 33 years. Farmer, who has voiced Goofy since 1987, tells EW. Whether it's fans at Comic-Cons or just people writing to me, nothing I've ever done has equaled a Goofy movie in terms of the effect that it's had on audiences. I hear people say, yeah, I couldn't talk to my dad very well. We weren't that close, but a Goofy movie kind of brought us together, and we would play it every year or put on the soundtrack in the car. That one movie has kind of identified with people more than anything else I've ever done.
Wow.
You don't even necessarily have to talk about things if they're hard to talk about, but just like having that mutual experience in common can help build some of those connections. Even if you don't do what we're doing right now and sit and analyze it, you can just know that you have that thing in common. And it's always something that you'll be able to refer back to if you need a common ground or a starting place. And here's my other message. If you happen to notice that one of your coworkers talks repeatedly about crushing their son under their thumb, maybe call somebody. Maybe reach out to that kid, make sure he's okay.
Yeah, this ain't the 90s anymore. We have child protective services.
Pete is a bad dad.
Bad dad. Bad dad alert. Bad dad alert.
Dad. That's our official take here at A Safe Place for Boys. Pete, the bad guy from Kingdom Hearts?
Yeah.
Not a good father, it turns out.
Bad dad.
Bad dad.
We got a bad dad here.
We gotta get PJ out of there.
Let's do a quick rundown of bad dads. Jurassic Park, bad dads, go.
John Hammond.
Yes. Okay, next movie we did.
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Bad dad, go.
Claude Frollo.
Yeah. Next one we did.
The girl walks home alone at night. Hussein, bad dad.
Hussein, bad dad. Fucking bad dad. Next one? This one?
This one.
Bad dad?
Pete.
Bad
dad.
So far we've had a bad dad in every one.
Yeah. It turns out bad dads are kind of a theme in media. That's because a lot of filmmakers had bad dads.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, justice for PJ. We're going to start maybe a GoFundMe or something. We're going to get him out of there.
Nah, he's like running a Fortune 500 at this point.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, he doesn't talk to his dad anymore.
No.
I mean, Pete's in prison, definitely.
Kingdom Hearts prison.
Yeah. That's where Disney characters get sent when they're bad, is to Kingdom Hearts. But PJ, he might be okay. So let's do our scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good a resource do you think a Goofy movie is for the boys of the world?
How many Pete's out of... for the boys, I'm going to say... Man, I keep giving roughly... All right, the question is, do I like this better for the boys than Jurassic Park? And I think I do.
All right.
Only because it's direct. Like, I was surprised to learn that Jurassic Park had so many themes of paternity and maternity, really. But this one is overt. It's like it is full frontal. This is a father and son story, and it does a good job of it. I'm tempted to give it an 8. Thinking an 8.
All right. 8 leaning towers of cheese.
Pizza.
All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I think target audience, dads, sons.
Yeah, this is a you know, mom's going away for a trip on the weekend, got some work to do, or her and the girls are out, and it's just you and the kiddos, you know, you and the boyo, and you're just trying to
Mom and daughter are in the other room watching Lady Bird.
Yeah.
They're not having a good time.
Y'all are eating Hungry Men TV dinners in the floor, like...
In the floor?
In the floor.
Oh, no.
That's a real Southern/Appalachian thing I didn't realize I said until years ago. I've since corrected, but I say it sometimes now just for fun, just to see who calls around. And, of course, Grammar Mom Kelcee over here. You know,
I was just picturing someone clipping through the floor like they were in a video game.
Yeah, like waist down from my belt and below, you can't see me, but my torso and my arms are coming up out of the floor, and we're eating Hungry Men dinners. Hungry Mans. We're eating Hungry Manses.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
On TV trays watching a Goofy movie.
There's no better way to bond with your son.
That's the target audience right there.
All right. Yeah. Well, hey.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. That's pretty good.
It's not bad.
All right. Any other thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, if you're stuck on the floor, maybe... No.
All right.
No.
Well, in that case, I think we've done it again.
Yeah.
No one stopped us.
Jam on!
Wow. If you had gotten the lyrics right, that would have been such a good moment.
It was a really good impression.
It feels like you and I are not seeing eye to eye right now.
I like that. What were the lyrics to the one?
Stand out.
Stand out!
All right, we gotta go.
We gotta go.
We're losing it.
Losing my mind.
Okay,
it's
this is
true positive fear.
Bad audio that you're creating.
Stand out.
All right, everyone, that's gonna do it for us this time. We will see you in the next episode for more compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. Bye.
Bye.
Yuck.
Yuck.